Today, we're going to be watching slavery from a Scottish point of view, a lesson from Scottish history. So we're going to see what this is all about here. And ting, welcome to Mr. Giant Reacts a ting, a ting, a ting. I'm Mr. Giant, and without further ado, let's get right into this here. Let's YouTube and simmer.
If I say slavery, what image comes to your mind? If you live in the Western world, then even if I presented a blank screen here, your mind's eye would probably have conjured up an image very much like this one, and with it, a whole basket of attitudes, opinions, and prejudgments that linger. Am I right? But today, I'm going to ask you to think differently. Can you do that? Because in this video, I want to illustrate that slavery is not black and white. Neither is it black and white. So let's reset for a moment. Racial hatred doesn't make sense. There seems to be a group who hate Jewish people and black people. Why both? It's like saying, I don't like raspberries, so naturally I don't eat shellfish or lamb either. I say that because I hate raspberries and shellfish and lamb. But I don't imagine for a minute that I'm part of a large subset of a Venn diagram. I mean, the Jewish people are probably with me on the shellfish, but probably not the raspberries. Are raspberries kosher? As a tour guide, I once had a Jewish family on tour. Now, the only reason that I knew that they were Jewish was that I had bought them some Tunnocks tea cakes and they refused them. Apparently, raspberries, shellfish, pork, and Tunnocks tea cakes. I asked lots of questions that I'm sure were way more intrusive than appropriate. One of which was, why? What's with the hating Jewish people thing? I just don't get it. Not only that, it seems to have been a recurring theme for a long time. Hating Jewish folk just didn't make sense to me. Until they refused the Tunnocks tea cakes, obviously. I explained that I understood the racism that a diminishing number of white folks have towards black folks, even in the 21st century. You see, there was a time when it was essential for some white folks to see black people as less than human in order to justify transatlantic slavery. People had to learn racism because financial gain depended on it. So the idea was promulgated until it became ingrained in society. It's why we in the Western world are used to thinking about slavery in the context of race. I don't see the same logic for the Jews. One of the ladies said, but Jews were the original slaves. No, they weren't. It wasn't like Ramesses came to his advisors one day and said, I was walking in the park and I saw these folk. Jews, I think they were called. And it gave me an idea. And I've invented a thing called slavery. And the good news is, it gets our pyramids built faster as well. Slaves already existed. I didn't question her whether Jews had ever owned slaves.
Now, I've gotten some comments on my slavery videos where people are saying that to call Irish people with slaves or anybody with slaves is a way of diluting the African experience in slavery. And that's sort of a singular way of thinking, you know what I'm saying? Why does it have to be one or the other? Now, I understand that the Irish were indentured servants, but I also understand that conditions probably were harsher for Africans, but doesn't mean that their conditions was the best, you know what I mean? And somebody says, well, the Irish own slaves too, but certain Africans own slaves too here, and it seems like it's split down the middle. Oh, the liberals and the conservatives, and everybody have their own opinion of what the vibe is, but nobody's got the human opinion. See, slavery is not because of race. Like he said, it's because of money And once the politicians realize that they could use that to divide, they start using that in their campaigns. Because every campaign that I've seen here in the last few years, and it's been overt, it's like pitting black people against white people a lot. And now it's pitting black people against black people, and white people against white people. And you tell me if that's not a, how should I put it, implicit plan by those with money who control the politicians to manifest that separation. Because if we keep blaming each other for the problems, we're not going to see what the real problem is. And that's why I tell people I'm neither liberal or conservative. I'm looking for our similarities, the similarities in our history. You know what I mean? The similarity in our cultures, you know what I mean? I also respect the differences. Because the differences is what makes us exciting and intriguing to learn about. The similarities is what should bring us together. And the most thing that we are similar is being human. And if people are taking sides, especially if it's a mass among the people, they've been taught to take sides. And then we have to ask ourselves, why are they taught to take sides? Who is benefiting from that division? Somebody said a human is a human, in a comment they said a human is a human. Well, you know, what does that say about the African experience? That says that someone who was making money dehumanized them, which makes it easy to explain away the slave trade to the other people who they indoctrinate to believe that those people are necessary to be slaves so that they could prosper, and in the long run they didn't prosper either. So who is prospering? Who's getting the better the end of the stick here? Those are the questions we should be asking, not trying to figure out who was a worse condition or who was worse condition. Because look at how money is. Generation after generation after generation, people are rich. Look at who is poor. Generation after generation after generation. And that, my friend, is not indigenous to one group of people. That's for everybody. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic. When you're poor, you pretty much stay poor. Every once in a while, somebody gets through the barrier, and it's usually by entertaining the rich. You know what I'm saying? You know, okay, like black people. Oh, the basketball players, you know. Oh, they're making millions, they're rich and stuff like that. But who are they entertaining? Who's making the most money there? It's not the ball players. They ain't making as much money as the owners. You know what I mean? Music. Who are they entertaining? Rap music. Who buys rap music more? Rich white kids, and they all gangster and all kind of stuff, and they're all homeboys and all of that. Who is benefiting from all of this? Let's get back to this. And I'm not saying it's white people, I'm saying it's rich people. Because there's some rich black fools out there too. Oh yeah.
I brought you to Kouros before to tell you how it was used in Outlander and to tell you the tale of Thomas Cochrane Seawolf. Today, I brought you here to talk about slavery. So if you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you the story.
Tell us, my brother.
So George Bruce built Kouros Palace behind me at the turn of the 17th century. Its big success was coal mining, and what often went with it, salt pans. Coal was becoming an ever more vital part of the economy. Coal workers were a unique breed. They often worked in families. The husband would go down the mine and hew the coal. His wife would carry the coal to the surface. The kids would probably be involved as well. Spending all that day down a mine as a family brought the social limitations of a solitary career and the stigma of the career choice itself. Was it a choice? You weren't forced into it. But you didn't get kids saying, Dad, when I grew up, I want to dig coal. That's a good career choice, son, because I'm pretty certain you'll achieve your goal. But owners of a coal mine, they had problems as well. If workers left your mine to go and work for another, the 1597 Poor Laws in Scotland said that somebody who'd been sentenced as a vagrant could be given in servitude to anyone who would keep him in employment, and he and his children could be kept in lifelong bondage. Well, vagrants, yes, serves them right for not having proper jobs, eh? 10 years later, in 1606, the Anant Colliers and Salters Act passed into law. It said that if you had a job as a coal miner or worked in the salt pans, you couldn't leave your employer without a written testimonial. You were bound to him for life. Abandoning your role or taking up other employment without permission was a criminal offence of theft from your employer, and you could be hunted down, and if captured within a year and 1 day, could get a flogging. If you were a coal miner, things had just changed. Before 1606, you were notionally free, with all the real-life restrictions of being born a poor collier compared to being born a coal owner. But now, that notional freedom was gone. And things got worse. Because as courts applied the law, a year and a day seemed to get longer. In the case of Wallace of Craigie and William Cunningham of Brown Hill, coal workers who had left Craigie's mine 8 years before were forcibly returned to their owner. The ratchet had clicked another notch.
See, here's a I know this might, some of y'all might think this is stretching it, but think about it here. Like, okay, we work these minimum wage jobs. They cut hours so that, you just make barely enough to survive. I think the difference is there's nowhere else to go. At first they tell you, oh, it's your fault for not getting an education. But then you get the education and you're still in the same boat. Because the jobs are not there. It just depends on where you live. Let's set that straight. But it's usually in the poorest places, like where I live. You understand what I'm saying? I work at a grocery store, and I know several people with college degrees working in those grocery stores. Because the job market isn't the best here. And the people who usually have the jobs are the people who had a family base in this place. The middle class, not so much the upper middle class, but just the middle class, they end up being lawyers and doctors and stuff like that. So in order for people who are ordinarily just here and working and stuff, they gotta leave. That's why this place where I live is bleeding people so much. Because opportunities are limited to those who know somebody. And so now going back to the whole thing about the type of slavery where I call it, I'm gonna create a whole new term: implicit slavery. If you keep people at a certain level, you don't give them health insurance, you don't give them hours at work, you try to have them do 3 people's job for 1 pay. That's just another. That's implicit slavery, especially if you have nowhere else to go. I'll give you a perfect example. I remember I was working for this toy store, right? When they first came here, they were really good. The minute they realized that it's in a depressed area and people need the work, when somebody got disgruntled with something of being treated unfair with their hours and stuff like that, I heard a manager told somebody one time, hey, you could leave, somebody else is going to come and get it. But he knows that person can't leave because they got bills and kids to take care of. I'll give you another example. I was working for a telemarketing company, and when they first came here, it was rosy, things were great. And then they realized, they probably knew that from the jump, but they didn't just want to get right into it. But after a while, it got to the point where, you need me more than I need you. So you could go if you wanna. And then they start changing stuff like how you get your bonuses, and they start changing all this stuff. Making it harder for you to make money. But That's because they realize, into a certain degree, it's the best thing that's going around here. And if you leave at your own peril. So when I talk about these things like that, it's not because I'm just talking up my mouth. I actually experience and live through it. You understand what I'm saying? And I actually experience it and living through it now. So I'm talking from experience, my own, and what I see around me. So, I call it implicit slavery. It's the way the system works, you know what I mean? They tried to do that with the coal miners here years ago until they got unionized. Now they're killing all the unions, so you have nobody to protect you. And if there's nobody protecting you, including the polytricksters, you're out to dry. You become, in essence, a slave.
A new law in 1641 extended servitude to not just colliers themselves, but to surface workers and ancillary roles. The legislation also extended to workers in manufacturing, although that wasn't strictly enforced. This law also banned coal miners from customary holidays other than one day at Christmas, and it demanded a 6-day week.
That's kind of like what's happening now. All the holidays they're making people work on. All the holidays. The last two is Thanksgiving and Christmas, and Thanksgiving is slowly being eroded. And they're going to come for Christmas next. My prediction.
What about the collier children? The School Establishment Act 1616 required publicly funded, church-supervised schools to be established in every parish in Scotland, but not for the children of coal miners. Slavery would be hereditary.
How are they doing it here? Your kids don't want to go to college. They're going to teach them liberal bunk. They're going to be able to think for themselves and, figure out who to vote for and who is in their best interest. Don't send your kids to college. Send them to trade school. So they go straight into that trade school mentality and learn a trade so they could be substitute to the kids of the people who own the stuff. I haven't been on here a while, so yeah, I'm babbling. Let's get back to this. Or should I say subjugated? Subjugated.
It was limited to 20 merks. Now, coal owners would use this custom to give an existing coal worker's newborn a baptism gift. So even as the minister gave the child to God for eternity, the coal owners was saying in life, that child belongs to me. The dad was responsible for paying costs of recovery if one of their children ran away.
You see, it's not as harsh. What I'm saying, that is kind of similar to what's going on, it's not as harsh. You could always leave and go somewhere else. But if the economic situation doesn't compel that you are able to do that, and you're stuck, it's the same thing. Now, if they don't make you do something, then they can say it's your fault that you're there because you're not trying to do something different. So they could transfer the blame back to you. No, I'm not saying it's a big conspiracy, don't get me wrong. Some things it's just the way it is. There's no concise conspiracy saying that we're going to do this so this is going to happen. Sometimes people just stumble onto stuff that works and they just use that to manifest how things are.
Another act in 1672 gave coal masters the right of apprehending vagabonds and their children without the need of a trial in a court of law. Coal workers were included in the inventory of sale in land or property. In Fife, a collier wasn't even allowed to be buried in the same grounds as a free man. Now, I've called them slaves. It was a term often used at the time and in general and in legal documents, but you might reasonably say that as the ratchet tightened on men who had started off nominally free, the Caribbean and the Americas were full of black men and women in far worse conditions, and you'd be right. Colliers were paid a wage, sometimes as much as 3 times that of a general labourer. They could own property, they could pass that property on to their children, they could even stand for the borough council. But they couldn't leave their master or choose a different life for themselves or their family. They weren't chattel slaves transported across an ocean, subjected to horrific conditions, punishment, torture or murder. The conditions weren't great. But their women weren't systematically raped by the mine owners. People often comment about ancestors who crossed the Atlantic having been sold into or having sold themselves in indentured servitude. And that's not the same thing either. But slavery isn't black and white. It's not digital, it's analog. At one end, you're notionally free but have freedoms restricted by employers or others. You might even have to get vaccinated for the greater good. At the very other extreme is life under the lash in cotton fields or a sugar plantation. Each click of the ratchet turns the screw a little bit higher until... This is the image of Scottish mining that I grew up with. Hard-working, noble men, not children, who put in a day's shift at the pit head and lived as members of a free society. So how did the change happen? I've brought you to Scotland's National Mining Museum at Newton Grange, which is worth a visit when you can, incidentally. And I've brought you here to take you back to the 1770s and another look at that freeman-slave continuum. In 1769, John Wedderburn came home to Perthshire having made a bucket load of cash as a plantation owner in Jamaica. 7 years earlier, he'd bought a young slave boy from a ship's captain newly arrived from the Guinea coast. Wedderburn brought the slave Joseph Knight back with him to serve in his home in Perthshire, where he was baptised. But when young Joseph got jiggy with Anne Thompson, one of the other servants, Wedderburn refused to let him live with his now wife and child. When Knight left anyway, his master had him arrested. Now, Knight knew that a couple of years earlier another slave had landed in England, claimed his freedom, and it had been judged that slavery was unsupported by common law in England. Joseph Knight too won his case in Perthshire, but his master appealed and the case went all the way through the various stages of the Scottish court up to the Court of Session in Edinburgh, and the court decided that slavery and its state is not recognised in the laws of this kingdom and is inconsistent with the principles thereof. The slave owner's appeal was thrown out, but the Court of Session, because we sit here to enforce right, not to enforce wrong. Although in the plantations they have laid hold of the poor blacks and made slaves of them, yet I do not think that it is agreeable to humanity, not to say to the Christian religion. Is a man a slave because he is black? No, he's our brother, and he's a man. He's in this land of liberty with his wife and child. Let him remain there. The court thus held that the dominion assumed over this Negro under the law of Jamaica, being unjust, could not be supported in this country to any extent. Unless he was thinking of working down the pit. The court also held that Joseph Knight was protected from being unjustly arrested for leaving his master under the habeas corpus rights conferred by the Act of 1701. Rights which the Act specifically denied to coal miners.
Wow.
It was while all this was going on that an Emancipation Act for coal miners passed through the Scottish Parliament, so that anyone becoming a coal miner was no longer bound to servitude. But if you were already a coal miner, then depending on your age, you had to wait 3 to 10 years before you were entitled to freedom.
Wow.
These terms could be extended if no replacement was found for you. Oh, and by the way, it wasn't just given to you. You'd have to have the time and wherewithal to take the matter to court. So years after the slave Joseph Knight was freed, many coal miners were not. Plus, the emancipation of miners didn't come because of an outcry for Christian values. It came because coal owners needed to find a way to persuade people to go and work in their mines. As it turns out, higher wages in exchange for serfdom and slavery somehow hadn't worked. The final Parliamentary Act liberating coal miners came in 1799. But let me make 3 quick points. 1. Slavery isn't digital. Coal miners were moved little by little up that increasing slope of slavery as their rights were eroded by each succeeding Act of Parliament. And there's maybe a lesson in that for us all. 2. Men like Joseph Knight may have been higher up that slope, but slavery isn't black and white. If anything, the true colour of slavery is green. And one last point. By the time this was in full swing as a modern working colliery, coal slavery was gone. And I don't remember anybody looking down on people because they were coal miners. So if 250 years after Knight v Wedderburn, you do still look down on people because of their colour, maybe it's time to join the 21st century. I've got a video about slavery in the Scottish Church coming up on screen now. In the meantime, I mean, Dorcas could be Lamb Alley.
Wow, that was quite interesting there. That was quite interesting. You know what I mean? Like, we got to understand that some people could talk and say certain things without being affiliated with a certain party, a certain race, a certain religious belief or anything. People just talk. You understand what I'm saying? And we have to stop thinking from our own cultural perspective or our own cultural understanding of what something is in order to understand the other side. Nobody wants to do that. Everybody just want to look at it from their own perspective and not broaden the way they think to understand all of us here. We're here. We ain't going nowhere unless somebody press that button and blow the world up. At some point we got to go, wait a minute now. If somebody's telling me something, at least that's where I went. I'm going to say that's how I switched up. If somebody's telling me something, there have to be a reason for them to tell me that. If they're going to tell me who I should love, or why I should love this person, or why I should associate with this group or associate with that group, I want to know what is their motivation for telling me that. I'm not just going to blindly go, oh, those persons are bad, those people are bad. Forget them because so say so. I want to see for myself, understand for myself, especially looking at a cultural perspective, looking at the historical perspective. Now that's kind of dangerous in a world where people are so sometimes singular-minded, where they just see what they want to see. But you know what? The only way I could feel human is if I try to understand the next human being and what's going on with him and why certain things are the way they are. I mean, how are we going to fix anything if we don't do that? How are we going to fix anything if we let the greedy people tell us how to think? And these days they do it in a smart kind of way too. Here, when politicians talk, I go, okay, why is he saying that? What is his motivation? When somebody invite me to go to church, okay, why you want me to go to church? You know, why do you want me to think like you? That's the questions I ask, and maybe we should need to start asking those questions, you know what I mean? And I know a lot of people are asking those questions. It's time to, man, you know, because history can be skewed to suit a certain understanding of oneself and other people. And it's time we start reading in between the lines. I'm not saying history is not factual events and stuff like that. But in thinking why those events were told that way, and more, you got to ask yourself, if a person who is of less influence tell history, would it actually be as is told by those who have the power to tell it, or the power to make it go international? Anyway, man, I hope you guys enjoyed this video here, and ting. I'm gonna leave a link in the description for this video. This guy's got some cool stuff. I've seen him on here before, so go check him out, you know what I'm saying? And it's good to be back. Still feeling a little woozy and thing, but that's because I changed my diet, like completely changed my diet. But I'm getting back there, you understand? If you guys enjoyed this video, drop a like on there, share this with your buddies, you know? Bring up thinking, thought, try to understand, you know what I'm saying and thing. In the meantime, y'all take care of each other, alright? Cool runnings.